Hello and welcome to our webinar today, Investing in Smart Tech, Practical Guidance for Properties. I'm Jennifer Kent, Vice President of Research with Parks Associates, and so excited to be hosting this discussion today. This webinar is offered to you today in partnership with Cox Communities, and we thank them for their support. In fact, Parks Associates and Cox Communities just released a white paper on this topic, really highlighting how technologies can elevate the resident experience. This includes Parks Associates' proprietary research and is available for free for you to download. You can follow the QR code right here on the screen or the link that our team will share in the chat. Speaking of the chat, you can use the Q&A tab or the chat tabs to submit questions for the panelists today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, hear from you, so don't hesitate to add comments or questions to our discussion. I'm so pleased to be joined by several experts today who are leaders in the multifamily market. They are really totally immersed in deploying smart home tech. In fact, before we open the curtain here, they were talking about deployments that they're doing today and overseeing the deployments in the market. So fresh frontline point of view around multifamily properties. And I'd love to ask each of them to introduce themselves to you. So I'd like to start with Guillermo Rivas, who's the Vice President of New Business Development with Cox.
Good morning and good afternoon, depending where you're at. My name is Guillermo Rivas. I'm the Vice President of New Business Development at Cox Communications. And at Cox, our teams work with apartments builders, owners, and developers to maximize investment returns using fiber connectivity solutions to provide the very best managed Wi-Fi, IoT, and cloud applications for our clients.
Fantastic. So great to have you on today. And again, appreciate Cox's support for this webinar so we can have this discussion today. We also have Ned Murphy, who is the Chief Revenue Officer with Level. Ned, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Level.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Ned. I run the multifamily business for Level Home. Been with Level for a couple of years since Level acquired a company called Dwello, which was where I'd spent about 6 years and was really around the very early days of smart technology in multifamily. So Level is a smart technology provider, access control, automation, alerts to multifamily properties. We have a partnership with Cox and we're sort of actively deploying smart tech nationwide.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ned, for being here. We also have Keegan Huerta, who's the EVP of Asset Management with Sunroad Enterprises. Keegan, hi. Tell us a little bit about Sunroad and your role there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm with a company called Sunroad Enterprises, and we're a family-owned office out of San Diego. We currently own about 10,000 units across the country, with about 4,000 units in development, new construction. So it's really all multifamily that we're focused on here, and I'm responsible for all the day-to-day operations from San Diego to Charleston.
Wonderful. Great diversity of views on this panel to really share what's happening in the multifamily space. And before we dive into our conversation, I wanted to set the scene a little bit for what we're talking about today. So in this webinar, we'll be discussing how multifamily properties are thinking about smart tech investments and how that fits into the current market environment. Where is the opportunity? How are properties monetizing or thinking about monetizing technology deployments? What are the key IoT deployment challenges properties should be planning for? So thinking a little bit more tactically and practically about the deployment side of this, and also how do you plan for future investments, thinking about things like technology life cycles. So again, to set that framework for discussion, I thought it would be important to acknowledge the macro market picture. So the multifamily market is at a pretty key moment of change. We've got high interest rates and historically low housing stock, meaning that more of the US population resides in multifamily properties, and new apartment construction is at historic highs. Fannie Mae's mid-2023 report, for instance, citing Dodge Construction Data and Analytics, estimates a record 730,000 units would be completed in 2023. And in addition to all of those new units, we've got existing properties facing staffing challenges, rising insurance rates, and reduced consumer spending in some ways due to inflation, all of which puts downward pressure on rents. At the same time, resident expectations for their homes, for the properties in which they live, are changing. Consumer lifestyles are truly dependent on reliable connectivity, high-speed access to the internet to live, to work, to learn if they're students, to shop, to connect to healthcare, to entertainment, so much streaming and gaming happening online, to banking and much more. And MDU residents that live in what we'd consider a smart apartment, those apartments that do provide some smart home technology to the resident today, actually attract particularly connected and tech-forward residents. In Parks Associates research, we find that 36% of all apartment renters work from home today, continue to work from home, and that actually rises to 63% of those who are living in a smart apartment. We see that there are millions of Gen Z and digital native consumers that are now aging into the multifamily market that are really driving demand and preferences for the technology in their unit and around their properties. We find that more than half of those living in a smart apartment today are between the ages of 18 and 34, and 39% have kids in the household. And if you follow anything on the consumer IoT, smart technology, you know that households with children are a key segment that really values and spends on smart technologies. We find that MDU residents are interested in a variety of connected living use cases and benefits, with security and safety topping the list. Like consumers in single-family homes, MDU residents want to be able to monitor activity outside of their home and to communicate with people who come to their doors even when they're not home. They also want to be able to access their unit remotely or grant access to others. Notably here, you also see that more than a third of MDU residents also rate smart energy controls as highly valuable. So smart thermostats, lights that can save the resident money, and with rising energy costs, and again, that the impacts of inflation, features that help residents save money are attractive. Of course, these same features can help properties keep consumption down for vacant units, or set the right atmosphere and provide remote access for prospective tenants that might be viewing a vacant unit. Interestingly, we also find that smart tech impacts resident satisfaction with their property. So here you can see that 83% of MDU residents who have access to property provided smart home devices are satisfied or highly satisfied with their property, compared with 66% of those who do not have property provided smart home tech. So property and owners and managers investing in connected experiences may seek to decrease, by raising resident experience and satisfaction, you might be decreasing vacancies and the turnover costs that come with that. We also find, final point here, that in our survey work of property owners and operators, when we survey the actual property owners and managers, they tell us on average that properties can support higher rents in units with smart home devices. Now, this will vary depending on the property, and of course, owners may be investing in smart home devices for their higher end properties to start. There are also a variety of models of recouping that investment, but whether it's included in the rent or a separate amenity fee, our research suggests that smart property tech is an opportunity for properties to compete at the top of their market and to keep vacancies down. But I'd love to hear directly from our panelists today on what they are seeing in the market. So bringing in our great speakers here today, Keegan, I'd love to start with you. If you could give us, the the property view of what's happening in the multifamily housing market and what that means for thinking about making investments in technology.
Absolutely. So just from an overall supply standpoint, it's getting more and more competitive in the markets we operate in today. As you alluded to earlier, one of the things that we focus on here is really future-proofing our assets. Our philosophy at Sunroad is we're long-term holders, right? So we think about it over a long duration, 10 or 15 years. What do we need to do to maintain our market position? So we make strategic investments for the long term, and smart home is really something that we kicked off this year with Cox, or late last year actually, with Cox, and got rolling this year more aggressively. We've deployed smart home on about 2,200 units across our 10,000 unit portfolio, and you know we've learned a lot through that process, and you know the focus really is to create value for our residents, right? We want to offer something that makes us competitive in a marketplace that's ever changing and becoming more dynamic. So that's one of the strategies we've deployed, and it's been pretty successful. So it's something that we consider as a differentiator in the markets we're in.
Can you share a little bit about the technologies that you've selected, right? So when you say smart home tech, what does that practically mean? And is it in resident units or around the property, right? How did you, what are you deploying out there?
Sure. So our standard package is a keyless entry system. So it's got a door lock that you can put a code in and access the unit. You can also control it from your phone. So it makes it convenient. You know, in the evenings, you could be laying in bed and make sure your door's locked, right? So that we sell the convenience factor. The second piece would be the thermostat. So the smart thermostats that we have deployed, you know, completely programmable, so you can set it, you know, with the energy settings and maximize when you're cooling your home or when you're heating your home, you know, when the kilowatt hours are, you know, cheaper. So we educate our residents on how to maximize it and leverage it. The other piece of it is more focused on asset preservation, but we have leak detectors. So we put leak detectors in our units to help mitigate the risk of loss. And they've been quite effective. We've caught a number of losses, potential losses, and we've been able to mitigate those to, you know, maybe just one unit, where in the multifamily business, where you can quickly flood 3 or 4 units if it happens on a 4th floor. You know, so we've been able to catch that at the get-go and save just overall operating expenses on mitigation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ned and Guillermo, I'd love to get your perspective on this as well. And when we think about thinking about properties investing in smart technologies, kind of in where the market is right now, Ned, maybe you can start. Tell us a little bit about the demand that you're seeing for smart apartment solutions here right at the end of 2023, moving into 2024.
Yeah, so we're seeing really robust demand from all kinds of different owners and developers across their new builds and existing properties. I think that the interest really ranges, and you mentioned it before, Jennifer, but you know, smart apartment, I think, is the term that most people think about, but it goes beyond just the unit, right? So I think that a lot of that demand stems from access control. And there's this increased knowledge that the way you think about access control should really be an integrated experience, something that's uniform across your building access points, your perimeter access points, but then also, as Keegan was mentioning, to the unit. So I think that that's driving a lot of the research and the interest, and folks are looking for platforms and providers that can provide that seamless experience, not only to residents, but then also to staff, to visitors, and to prospects. You'd mentioned that there's a great amount of new construction starts that have happened in years past, and there's a lot of that new construction supply that's going to be delivering onto the market. So we've seen quite a bit of interest in trying to figure out what's the right package that we should be putting into these new buildings, to Keegan's point, to future-proof them, to make sure that we're going to be able to derive benefits from these capital investments for many years to come. On the other side of it, we're continuing to see a lot of strong demand with existing properties, whether that's with folks like Keegan's group who acquire properties, they do value add investments in them, and then they hold on to them for a long time, while also finding groups that just through the natural course of budgeting and doing capital improvements for the projects are looking for ways to make smart investments. So it's really, you know, it sort of depends the types of packages and the way people think about those investments based on where they're at in the property life cycle and what their business model is. But we're just seeing more and more folks that are educated around what smart technology can do. And they're starting to ask really good questions about what are the experiences that we're looking to provide, and you know, how does that pencil and hit the bottom line for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Guillermo, how about from your perspective? You know, you're talking to a lot of properties out there as well. Ned hit a little bit on the new construction versus retrofit, maybe in slightly different mindsets of, you know, how they think about investing in technology. How are you kind of meeting the various different property types where they're at right now?
I think regardless of the property type, where we meet the owner operator is really in the design of the system that's being implemented. It needs to be simple, it needs to be intuitive, and it needs to be user friendly, keeping in mind the various different users. One end user can be obviously an end user that is programming a thermostat, but at the same time, a user is also the property team that needs to have a smart, intuitive way to get to vacant units, to program thermostats, set settings, maximize the NOI there. Easy alerts, easy way to be notified on, you know, the washing machine spilling water, and try and prevent any further damage. So those things need to be easy and intuitive for the property staff to get to. And then your third and fourth users are going to be your visitors to a property, people that are delivering packages. How are they going to access the property? How are perimeter controls going to be integrated into the system? And your fourth user is, how's a visitor going to get from the front of the building to the fourth building in the back, fourth floor? Are you going to force the resident to go all the way to the front, or are you going to give them controlled access? So that's where we need to meet them, and we need to make all those things, as complex as they may be, as simple as possible for the users to use.
Yeah, actually, let me follow up on that. I'm glad you said that. As complex as it may be, because when you just talked about, okay, how do we let a package delivery person get all the way to the fourth floor in the back? I mean, you might be going through a whole lot of different systems, right? In the past, right, to get there. I imagine that you come to properties where that's the case, where you're coming into a landscape that already has a variety of systems. So can you expand it all on, when you think about making it simple and easy, you know, what that actually means? I imagine that's something that properties, when they're thinking about investing, are really considering. Gosh, how does this fit in our current technology landscape?
It needs to be considered from the very beginning. You know, what are the different integration points? How do you maximize simplicity in who you're choosing? And you want to make sure that you're not using a system, a limited system, to actually dictate the experience for the two most critical end users, the resident and the property staff.
Do you ever, and actually Keegan might be able to address this too, thinking about the staff in particular, right? And how they may support or not, or how they think about learning. You mentioned how important it is to kind of educate the resident, educate the staff. You know, Keegan, what do you think about there when we're trying to onboard technologies and make it really easy, to Guillermo's point?
Getting the buy-in from the on-site team is critical to the success of the program, right? And then leveraging the system to the maximum capability, right? So those are the two challenges that we have worked through with Cox, and I think Cox has done a nice job of sending out representatives regularly to sit down with the manager, do training, educate the team, right? There's things that that I was able to learn from some of our managers. They were telling me, hey, let me show you, I can do this, and I can do that. Some of the analytics, some of the data that comes through on just the overall, like, vacant units is a great way to manage vacant unit electricity. We have access to control the vacant unit thermostats, right? So some of those things, and just teaching the managers how to set the settings where it automatically clears out the door code when someone moves out, right? The integration between the system and the smart home system, our property management software and the smart home system, was something that I was pretty impressed by, and something that it took a lot of training to understand exactly how it worked and the intricacies of it. But helping the team leverage it it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that in the single family side too. It's like, is everyone really using the full capabilities of the technology that they do have, you know, and how important that is. Well, I want to make sure that we talk about, you know, revenues and what the revenue opportunities. So we talked a little bit about how people are thinking about making this investment, but how do you think about kind of recouping that investment, and where's the biggest opportunity? Ned, I'd love to start with you and then go to Keegan. So when you're talking to properties about investing, what do they see as the revenue opportunity here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can build off the conversation that we were just having. I think it's really going to depend property to property. When Keegan was talking about, we started doing this last year, and he had a little smile, and he said we've learned a lot of lessons. I think that's very common. I think it's really important to remember that this is a physical installation at a property, right? This isn't sort of pure software. You're going to make a purchase and you're going to kind of click a few buttons and roll it out across an entire portfolio. This is very sort of property by property. To Guillermo's point, you got to really be thoughtful of the design. You got to be thoughtful of potentially making incremental investments in that property. If it's something that's been around for 10, 15 years, you might not be able to bite it all off in one. So I think pretty much everybody that we've worked with, there's going to be some kind of ancillary revenue or revenue upside, and that's going to be part of the analysis that they do when they're thinking about making an investment in smart technology. That might be in the form of a technology package that there is a sort of separate fee that is for. Some folks bake that directly into the rent. Some people see it as a way to sort of look at their sub-market and make sure that where they're performing is towards the high end of the market, given what their comps are doing. So there's always some aspect of that. That's always going to be one of the drivers. I think on the other side of the equation, looking at the sort of costs and the operational benefits, it's really going to depend, I think, on people's experience. So some folks, they might be really looking to squeeze out value from operational efficiency, and so they're mindful of the costs of rekeying, of energy in vacant units, of damage or vandalism, things like that. Others might have had an experience like Keegan was talking about before, where they had a leak on the 4th floor and they really wish that they'd spent $40 on a leak detector, because it ended up coming down through the walls and causing quite a big bill. And other folks, especially in areas like the Southeast, where humidity is a big thing, mold. So yeah, I think it's really going to depend on where the property's at in terms of its life cycle, and then also where it's located in the country, and the business model that's really driving the decision making for the owner or the developer.
Mm-hmm. Keegan, can you share a little bit behind the scenes of your thinking, right, on what the revenue opportunity is here, right? Where is the value in the investments that you're making? Yeah,
it's a great question. We don't lead with a monetization mindset. We lead with a value creation mindset, and then we believe that the value follows. So in more direct terms, if we create enough value for the residents, we think they're going to want to stay with us longer, extend their lease longer, and they're likely willing to pay a little bit more overall for a better user experience, right? So that's sort of how we look at things and how we engineer things from a philosophy standpoint. From a technical standpoint, we have deployed this where we just charge one fee. It's an amenity fee for all of the services that we offer at our communities. And smart home is included in that, along with some other services. And those fees can vary just depending on the depth of services, the type of asset that's receiving the service. So that's sort of how we structured it from a technical standpoint.
You mentioned losses earlier, and again, Ned brought it up, the kind of water leak situation. Is that a preventative investment from your mindset, or are there actual insurance implications, right? So I think it's a little early in days for insurance IoT. We hear that insurers, need all sorts of data over really long time frames to prove, the risk assessment. How about in multifamily? Are insurers really seeing that, making an investment in something like leak detection or even water shutoff valves that you can automatically shut off the water, justifies adjustments to insurance rates? Are you seeing that yet?
So we brought it up to our insurer this last renewal cycle, and I mean, I'll tell you that our insurance across our portfolio, we were up 3 or 4%, which, from a industry perspective is spectacular. I know they definitely took it into account. We're not in some of the higher coastal markets, that are more prone to larger increases, like Florida or even Texas. So it's difficult to say apples to apples, but we definitely believe that there's value created from, just the overall mitigation, right? And it's expense control really is the focus right now for us, in an environment where rents are flat or negative a little bit. It's really the shift from, the rent growth of 2021. It's expense control for 2024. So we just finished our budgets, and that's what we're focused on across our project. And so monitoring the vacant units and really watching any losses from water damage would be our focus.
Awesome. Having a little trouble with my windows here. Excuse me if you guys can see. A little bit of a window here. I'm trying to move that off. So thank you for that. So one thing I wanted to also maybe bring up is in this, there we go, market right now, when you think about the cost of essentially money, right? The cost of loans, the interest on loans, it can be expensive, right? To build or to renovate right now. Are you, and Guillermo or Ned, if either one of you would like to comment on this, are you seeing properties decide to, trim down the packages that they're taking because of that? Are they focusing on sort of getting out a few core devices or core network, right? Is it impacting at all the investments that they're making? Or, to Keegan's point of view, he's talking, these are properties we're holding for 10 years, right? And so we're looking at the investment over this long time frame. And so that the particular of kind of that issue of the market right now really isn't impacting things.
Yeah, so I mean, I think by and large, I would say the most of the folks that we talk to fall into the latter category. If you're going to make the investment, make the proper investment that's going to have long-term value for you and your property. With that said, it's the realities of the environment. So I think that there's likely been some more scrutiny in thinking about what are the major value drivers when you're thinking about smart tech in a property. Across the board, what we see is it starts with access, right? So you're very rarely going to see someone say, okay, I'm going to make an investment in smart tech, and it's not going to include building access control and a smart lock. Sort of quickly after that, that's where we see investments in climate control, so thermostats. And then from there, I think it really depends on the type of property, right? Single family, built to rent, single family rentals, it's going to be a different package than you would see in a garden style versus a mid-rise or a high-rise. So, when folks are committed to developing a new build and they want to make sure that they're, developing something that's going to be able to sort of be competitive and provide value to residents for quite a long time, I think we're seeing, a similar mindset. When it comes to doing sort of value add projects, maybe, it's a little bit of a leaner mindset there, but by and large, I think people are going to make the investments where they see the value. And I think that's what cost effective is, right? What's the value for the money that you're paying? And so people are going to definitely take their time and evaluate what's the right combination of benefits for them.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question that came in on this point of creating new revenue streams. I'm thinking about the revenue, so I wanted to bring it forward maybe to Keegan and Guillermo. So the question is specifically whether or not, Keegan, in your properties, you are doing essentially bulk agreements for internet access, right? Whether with Cox, if Cox is in all of your footprints, right, or other internet service providers. But maybe you could, it's kind of a hot topic of properties, thinking about new internet service models, offering bulk internet, offering maybe managed Wi-Fi or premium Wi-Fi on top of that. Is there anything that you'd like to share around the internet model that you're offering?
It's a good question. It's not the way we've structured our agreements, and there's a lot of different philosophies on this. Again, it's not, we don't lead with the monetization mindset. It's really user experience mindset. And so, going with a bulk agreement, you take away some of the freedom of choice for the residents. I will say that in most of the markets we're in, and in the markets we're in with Cox for sure, Cox is often a leader in terms of internet. So I think we'd be providing probably the best service. But again, it's a good way to monetize properties, and we've done bulk agreements before, but we didn't deploy that with the smart home tech in this particular instance. We kept it separate, and the technology operates either on a cellular signal or on a Wi-Fi signal.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So that actually gets somewhat into what I wanted to talk about next, is really the practical deployment considerations that we see them in the market, so that we can share, especially with those properties that are listening today. Guillermo, I'd love to start with you here. If you could share what key challenges property owners should plan for when they're gearing up for deployment, right? Maybe considering or actually hitting that implementation stage, right? What are the key challenges that property owners should plan for?
So I'm actually going to use your last question to segue into that. So you can definitely gong me if I've gone way over on the talk track. But to Keegan's point, what I want to say about the products and services in what I would call phase one type of deployments, or the first generation, there was a lot of failure with cellular access only because of dead spots on property, right? You're not going to get 100% connectivity on just cellular only. We have a product in place in partnership with Level where we are seeing on our deployments 95% plus average uptime on hub statuses. And when we say 95%, that takes into account vacancies, that takes into account folks that just absolutely don't want to have smart technology and may unplug, and we just want to have a dumb door and a dumb thermostat. So the default does go to that. But from a connectivity side, from a Cox perspective, that does not require bulk modem or managed Wi-Fi to be there. We've come up with a solution where we maximize the network that we already installed on the property in order to provide the connectivity for IoT so that you can get out to the cloud, whether that's done through all Wi-Fi or through mesh with edge routers getting out to the cloud using our network. We maximize the use of the infrastructure that's already there, that is actually owned by the owner of the property. So for us, that's been very important. Then going over to how to plan for it, right? That was the perfect segue, because really it's going to be, what are the connectivity challenges with the provider that you're choosing? Whether it's the provider that you're choosing for IoT and how they're going to play in the sandbox with a provider for internet connectivity. The watches are who's going to point fingers at whom if you don't have a single provider that's doing all in one. Secondly is that design appropriate for the property? New construction, as you mentioned earlier, fairly simple, right? You can get in behind the walls. If you plan for it far enough in advance, you can have conduit, you can have everything to future-proof going forward, or at least prepare for the future, because I don't think anything's really future-proofed. But definitely be prepared for the future by what you install initially on new construction projects. On retrofits, that's when it gets very tricky, and you really got to be careful with what connectivity solutions are going to be in place. What is the design of that connectivity? How are the different devices going to speak, and what is it really going to look like? So everything from connectivity to aesthetics come into play, because if you have a 15-plus-year-old property, you're probably not going to have any right-size structured wiring panels that are going to fit all of this stuff. So when designing for it, is it going to go on the floor? Is it going to go on a shelf? Does it work putting it in the back closet of the townhome type of apartment and the third floor in the back closet? Is that really going to work for connectivity for the door lock? So those are all things that need to be designed for, and definitely challenges.
Yeah, what you're talking about there, especially with the aesthetics and the real specifics of how things are actually going to work and fit, seems like maybe a first step is definitely going to be actually your vendors being on site and seeing these things, right? When you think about that level of detail and the real variety of buildings out there, building materials, the built environment generally, is that something that you all are find to be important, Guillermo?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned, I'm going to say we're not saints and we're not perfect. We've learned the hard way, right? You agree to putting in smart door locks, didn't properly do a site survey and a walkout, and you find yourself that the owner at the level that you were dealing may or may not have known of privacy locks, and if you didn't do a sidewalk, you as a vendor weren't able to provide those insights as someone that's trusted to say, hey, by the way, there's a privacy lock. By the way, due to a privacy lock, the way that we would initially design for the smart lock, it's not going to properly fit. We need to make some adjustments. Those type of things really require a site survey. Thermostats, the placement of thermostat. Also, if you're replacing, swapping things out, what is the plan for the aesthetics post? It's highly unlikely that the door lock is going to match perfectly to the previous door lock that was there in its paint. Highly unlikely that the thermostat's going to do a proper match. So are you doing a back cover to cover the hole that was there in the back, because it may be bigger than what the current thermostat is? Is the hole big enough? Is there a need for batteries, or is the C-wire really working? So all of those things actually require that you be out on the property, and I'd say that's a caveat for anyone that is going to be doing this, is the partner going out and really looking and checking for these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Ned, I didn't know if you had anything to add there, just especially with your strength in locks, right? Some specific, as well as other devices, of course, but maybe some specific tactical, practical, to-dos here to build on what Guillermo's sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll come back to what Keegan said at the top again. I think it is very wise to keep in mind. If you've never done a deployment of smart technology, the criteria that you have to evaluate a vendor, the criteria that you have to evaluate what's the right package for a particular property is going to be different than if you have done it before. Experience with these things is incredibly valuable. What I've seen over the last 8 years is oftentimes the entire focus of the conversation is on the technology, and there's not enough of a conversation around the design and really getting into the details of each property that you're looking to do a deployment in. I think it's one of the things that's really held back the industry. I think first generation solutions and providers that don't take that time, that aren't really locked into the details, that don't really position themselves as operations sort of forward groups, you're just not going to have successful deployments, right? So, my recommendation is not to here's a checklist that's 100 items long based off of 8 years of doing these kinds of things. The recommendation would be, when you're considering working with a group, make sure that you're asking these types of questions and really push and see whether or not the way that they go about getting folks on site, the way that they are putting together their designs, is calling out things that might cost you a little bit more money. If you're looking at a bid where there's someone who calls out, hey, there's privacy lock spacing challenges, you might need to invest in some new C-wires, and you have another group that's just saying, oh no, it's going to be, it's going to be $150 less per unit, you don't need those things, it's going to tell you something. So yeah, I would be very focused on those details, because you will eventually have to be focused on those details. And it's always best to have that happen the first time through versus once you actually get out on site and you're needing to do change orders and you're incurring costs that you might not have thought you were going to need to incur.
Well, I want to hear Keegan's biggest challenges that he's faced. But first, actually, I would like to ask our audience who's on with us live today if they'd weigh in to our poll, marked poll 3, to our organizers who are helping me out with this poll, which really does focus on the challenges, right? So where we're asking our audience here, you can participate in this poll. Where are the biggest challenges in deploying new technology in your properties? Is it just, calculating the ROI and being confident in the investment, evaluating vendors, integrating with existing systems, onboarding residents and property staff, which I want to talk about a little bit, and then the ongoing support and service, right? It's really that after deployment view. So we're going to leave this open for just a few minutes while people take the poll and answer these questions. And while they're doing that, Keegan, I might ask you if you want to share some of the challenges that you found in the actual deployment process over this past year and some of those lessons learned.
Definitely, I can share. So I'll share with some advice. I think the best way to roll out smart technology is to start with the user experience and start with the expectation, and then develop the plan, right? So our deployment, we want the user to be able to show up at the community, enter the gates with their phone or some sort of smart control, get into the building with some sort of smart control, right? Ideally their phone, get into the amenities, the fitness center, full access to the building with their phone, and then get into their apartment with their phone, right? So that just creates a seamless user experience from front to back, in terms of access to the entire community. So what Cox has done, what we've worked on with them, is really developing with that understanding, kind of an assessment of every single thing, every one of those touch points. What kind of door locks do we need on our common areas? What type of technology do we need at the front? What type of technology do we need at the unit, right? What's the width of the door? Does it have a privacy lock? Does it not, right? So I think the site surveys are critical. It's a 100-page document where they go into every single floor plan and they design every single thing, from the lock, the way that the mechanism goes in. When it's a mechanical lock, you can't pull the door and lock it with the other hand. It's got to work on its own. So the striker plate has to be perfectly aligned. It's the little things like that I think Cox has figured out, and we've been able to nail this down, and it creates that seamless user experience. And I think that's really the critical piece, right? There's a lot of little things. Every property is different. And some of these other, Ned has mentioned some of the wiring and configuration, and Guillermo as well, as some of the challenges. But it's really assessing from the beginning and spending a few weeks looking at every floor plan and planning out how you're going to deploy it, what it's going to look like ultimately, and agreeing to that in terms of the user experience, right? So you can hit that and just start with that as the design. You're gonna have a pretty successful deployment.
Okay, so what our attendees here felt was number one here was also this idea of integration with existing systems. We do hear this a lot. There's usually not one system, there's multiple systems. There's the access control system. Here we go. You guys should be able to see the poll results here. Number one, by not actually that much, but is integrating with existing systems, and then the ongoing support piece. So maybe Keegan, if you want to comment at all on how it's been to integrate with existing systems, or if some of the new deployments stand alone well enough that they don't necessarily need to be integrated. And then I'd love certainly to hear from Guillermo and Ned about how you provide ongoing support and what that actually looks like.
So our existing deployments, we missed that, candidly. We could have done better. And I think in the newest iterations, we're planning a mid-rise installation. That's the target, right? We want that seamless integration, seamless user experience. So again, it's something that we've learned along the way, right? So I'm sharing, a lot of 2,200 units worth of experience across 6 or 7 communities now. So I think we've nailed it down to how we want it to function. We just got to deploy it. So that's sort of the goal for 2024. Okay.
Maybe Guillermo, you first, and Ned, if you want to comment at all about that ongoing support piece, right? Do you all have a role in onboarding staff or residents and supporting over the longer term? What are properties asking for there? And how do you kind of view that part of your customer's experience?
For us, and I don't want to repeat myself from the very beginning, but for us, the most important thing is really the experience that the property staff and the end user residents going to have, and those that are visiting the property. So from a support perspective, what we're looking at is watching out for the owner's investment. And the best way of doing that is through usage. What is the usage level and interaction of the property staff with the product, with the platform? If they're not interacting with it, they're bypassing it. And if they're bypassing it, we have to figure out why and make that better. So, and the way that we go about that is actually by having what we call community managers go out to the properties in the initial deployment, actually twice a week, to make sure that they are happy with the product, first of all, but secondly, that they're using it, seeing if there are any potential gaps, whether product related or usage related, so that they can get addressed and we can build that confidence from the property staff and the product. And the other point that develops that confidence is actually the end resident satisfaction. And by that, satisfaction for property staff is usually, I don't want to hear complaints. Right? They are there to rent apartments. They are there to do a whole lot of things and not run an IoT platform. So for them, it needs to be out of sight, out of mind for the resident. That's where being simple and intuitive on the app becomes very important, in that it works. When you go to the door, you punch that code or you use your phone to get in, door opens. Thermostats, you have them set at 75 degrees, they don't magically change on you. Those are the important things that develop trust and confidence in the platform. And that's how we support it.
Okay. Ned, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple on both points. I think Keegan's advice to think about the user experience first and sort of design from there is great. That's a really good way to think about it. We really do believe that access is the primary driver here. It's going to be providing, there are just so many, there's so many impacts that access has, building-wide access, curb-to-couch access has on the user experience, not only from a resident perspective, but also from a staff perspective, visitor perspective, prospect perspective. So with existing properties, especially with properties that are a bit older, being mindful of what is your strategy to bring your building access control into the modern day. That will often look like you're updating some kind of antiquated solution that's been in place for quite a while. I would challenge folks to be thinking about that from the very beginning And if you're thinking about that from the very beginning, the likelihood that you're going to be able to provide that seamless end-to-end user experience is going to be much higher. I think you also you need to know what your property management software solution is, and it's just table stakes that you've got to be able to do the sort of automated rent roll, move in, move out. That you need to have those things if you want the system to operate the way that it should. In terms of the support, I think Guillermo hit on a number of points. We know that staff turns over, right? Unfortunately, you don't have the same group of folks at a property for 5 years where they just sort of learn how the property works, learn how the systems work. So, we see it as our responsibility to make sure that we're continuously providing opportunities to train and to educate as we release new features, for example. And we also think that it's very important to not only be providing staff with tools and marketing content to help educate residents, but also to make through the onboarding experience with the actual platform, to make it really easy and intuitive to understand what are the benefits that I can derive from actually using these applications, and just kind of crossing that bridge and letting people know, you don't have to go to the store and buy something, install it and troubleshoot it, right? It's there for you. If you want to take advantage of it, you just have to download an app on your phone. A lot of it has to do with awareness and education, so it's a big focus for us as we deploy it at properties.
Okay, great. We have a little less than 10 minutes left, so I wanted to make sure we talk about what's next and future outlook. And Keegan, I'd love to start with you here. So beyond what you're already doing and really in the process of doing with all of your deployments, right? What's next? Are you planning additional investments in other types of technologies or in other properties?
We're always looking for new things, right? We pride ourselves in sort of being innovators or, the leaders a lot of times. Working for a family office, we have the ability to take more risks. So we're looking for those opportunities actively. EV charging has been one that has been sort of on our list. We've deployed a half a dozen or so dual port chargers on our portfolio. 2024, we should have EV chargers on probably most of our portfolio. Our goal is about 95% of our portfolio, which are the properties we think make the most sense. What's interesting is the adoption, the analytics behind it. We look at a lot of the data. Month over month we've had it deployed for about 5 months. Month over month for the last 3 or 4 months, it's the active users and sessions, charging sessions have doubled every month. Right, so it's quite interesting, and it makes a pretty easy case for me to sell it to our ownership group. So again, the focus is just value creation for our residents. Obviously, with the adoption of EVs, at broader scale, with more manufacturers moving in that direction, we want to make certain that we offer that to our residents and offer the convenience. But always open and always looking for new technologies and new things to lead the way.
Yeah, I can share from our research a little bit. What was really interesting in our most recent resident smart apartment study. So we've surveyed property owners and managers, but also the residents who are living in apartments generally, and some of which have some devices. There are far more residents who tell us that they want EV chargers in their properties than are actually using EVs today. So they may not yet be driving an EV, but it's aspirational, and they think they may, and they want to make sure that wherever they live would have that capability for them. So we thought that was a really interesting finding, that it's far more find it appealing and interesting and want it than actually would use it today. So it's definitely a forward-thinking investment, by thinking about EV charging.
Absolutely. And one of the things too, I'll share just the way we structured the deal, I think is interesting. So instead of going out and purchasing the EV charger, what we're doing is we structured a deal with a provider that's leasing us the equipment on a 3-year lease. And we've negotiated the rate down to what we think is a really good rate. And we're profitable on it based on the charging sessions. And we think that in 3 to 5 years, the technology is going to change drastically. So that's one of the reasons that we held back, so we can innovate. As the market moves, perhaps there's a wireless option in 3 or 4 years, right? And we'd want to deploy that. So kind of a smart way, I think. We spend a lot of time looking at it and meeting with providers. Kind of a good way to leave the options open and not invest too much on the front end.
Yeah, definitely a lot of change happening in the EV charging space. Not quite settled yet on the standards and exactly how it's all going to work. So that sounds like a smart strategy. Ned, this we actually got a question from the audience, and so I'd love to go to you and then Guillermo too about really what's next. The question specifically said that, Ned mentioned access control and thermostats having very broad appeal, but then, what do you really see joining those two? So if that's the core, what makes a lot of sense to add on? I think we talked about leak detectors. Anything else stand out in your mind?
Sure. I think that there's, once again, it's going to depend on the type of property. I think that at properties with less controlled access points between the outside world and the units, there's a higher demand for different types of sensors. So that could be recessed door sensors, it could be contact sensor, door and windows. Obviously, leak detectors are sensors that folks are investing in today. I think where it goes, I will answer the question, I promise. I think where it goes is that there needs to be, and I think that there will be, sort of heightened scrutiny around thinking about smart tech as enterprise grade infrastructure for your building that has to just work. The reliability has got to be there. If it's not there, it's not working. If you can't provide that type of uptime and reliability, then you're not going to continue to have demand from your customers. All of the benefits that can come sort of beyond that in terms of your alerts and your automations and increasingly getting into machine learning and sort of that type of thing. It doesn't matter if you do not have those fundamentals down, if you do not have that reliability, if you do not have that performance. So I think the next generation platforms like Levels, it's there, right? That sort of core, it's going to work, you can trust it, that's there. I think now that you have that, what you're going to start to see is things like sensor fusion, where if you do put multiple sensors into a unit, what are the kinds of models that we can be investing in where we're actually able to pick up in real time things that are happening with multiple devices and sensors, and then we're able to understand that's not the right combination of data points. Like something is off here. And whether that's sending an alert that's spot on, whether that's actually doing something and resetting a temperature, there's a lot that can be done there, building off of a lot of the progress that's been made in machine learning and AI, over the last handful of years. But I do really think it stems from that. It's the quality, it's the reliability, and then also just how that actually gets into the project and deployed. Those things have to be smooth. If it's not an excellent installation experience, then it's sort of falling short. So I think you're going to see a lot of advancement, a lot of improvement on those fronts. And I think once you have that, you're going to start to be able to see how you can get incremental value from incremental sensors by having the sort of back end of the platform start to fuse the data that comes from those sensors in a way that's predictive and logical and can help you avoid damage and avoid outcomes that you might not want.
Yeah, it's a great point, and certainly perhaps the generation that we're at with IoT technology generally, where the first wave of smart home or smart apartment is really connected, convenient, remote control, some automation, and now we're getting to the intelligence level, right? And this next generation of deployments. So Guillermo, I think actually the last word to you here. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you see the market changing in 2024. What you expect out of kind of the future of how smart technology for multifamily is evolving.
Cox Enterprises being a family-owned private company as well, we've been making a lot of smart bets, and the way that we've been doing our smart bets at Cox Communities is where can we help our clients, property owners and developers, with their problems. We are actually in IoT because of a meeting 4 years ago with a customer that said, we want this solution, can you guys take a look at it? After a lot of looking, we made the very wise investment and leveled up IoT, right, with our Level partnership. Going forward, what we're looking at is what can we help solve for? Whether it's through AI/machine learning, how do we provide analytics through sensors and cameras for usage of a basketball court, swimming pool? What type of analytics are property owners looking for that we can actually help solve for? Or how do we also participate and help bring to fruition how properties actually want to use EV charging? And what are the best ways to deploy it? For us, the way that we look at things is, what adjacencies to connectivity can we insert ourselves in that we can actually make better? So that's a little bit of an insight on how we look at the business going forward.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate all of you for your time, for your participation today. Thank you again to Cox for supporting this webinar and really sharing your expertise, all of you across the board, and what you've learned already in all of your deployments, and really being out there with clients and from the Property View Keegan, really beneficial. Thank you all. I also just want to, thank you. I also just want to remind everybody that we do have a white paper that complements this webinar with some data and research in it, and our point of view on the market and how smart technology deployments can really elevate that resident experience. So please, you are welcome to download that today. If you're interested in attending any of Parks Associates webinars or sponsoring webinars, interested in our research or in speaking, you can reach out to myself or my colleagues. And we have a series of events that we host throughout the year, and the next one is at CES. So Parks Associates hosts Connection Summit at CES. I think this is our 17th year doing it. We're official partner with CES, an official partner event. So we'd love to see you all out there. We're talking IoT, we're talking multifamily as one of our kickoff panels, and lots of folks from the industry joining us at our reception at night. So we welcome you all to attend that too. Thank you again to Cox, and thank you all again for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you.